Sound design is one of those things that viewers will notice only when it's bad, but when it's done right, it could be the last thing you do to an edit to make it actually feel finished. I'm going to be going over my exact workflow, not just on my YouTube videos, but also for my clients' projects. And it's a process that you can apply to literally any video. The very first thing that I do before even thinking about sound effects is I mute all of the voiceover. And this might feel counterintuitive at first, but it improves your focus on sound effects way more. When the VO is muted, you're able to focus entirely on timing movements, cuts, graphics, and transitions without being distracted by its dialogue. Sound effects live and die by timing. If a whoosh sound effect is even off by a couple of frames, you can tell immediately whether you have trained ears or not. So muting the voiceover gives you freedom to place sound effects exactly where they need to land. Next, I'll watch through the entire video from start to finish, placing markers throughout. I use markers a lot for planning the timeline, graphics, and especially sound effects. These markers act like a roadmap and hold reminders for ideas that I might forget about later on. Using different colored markers for each, I'll mark down spots for Foley, moments that need whooshes, and moments that are bigger or more impactful than the first two categories and just might need a little bit more of attention. And this step is extremely important in my process because in a way you're training your brain to think more ahead rather than clip by clip or just scene by scene. Hey, just quickly, before we move on to the next step, I just wanted to remind you to click the subscribe button down below. It would really help me out. Once I've gone through my first pass placing markers, I'll begin working layer by layer. Remember last step when I mentioned I'll use different colors on the markers for each different type of sound effect? This is where that comes in handy. Looking at the timeline, I use A5 strictly for whoosh sound effects. I'll watch through the entire video going by the green markers, matching whooshes to motion, cuts, and transitions. Then I move on to A6, which is dedicated to Foley sound effects. This is where things like UI video game sounds play, subtle hits, and a graphics movement come in. Most of my Foley comes from Epidemic Sound. I've got a referral link down in the description if you wanted to check it out. After that, A7 and below are reserved for bigger moments. These are sections that might need a combination of whooshes, Foley, impacts, risers, or even special sound design elements that don't really fall into just one of the categories I mentioned earlier. The key in this step is its separation. By giving each type of sound its own time and preparation, everything stays organized and fits well in place. And once all of the sound effects are laid out on the timeline, I'll unmute the voiceover to hear all of the audio together, and I'll do another full pass. This is where I start balancing levels and fixing any conflictions. Nothing should be peaking, and nothing should feel like it's fighting with the VO. What I mean by that is, if a sound effect is overpowering the dialogue itself, that can create a problem. If it's fighting with the voiceover, the graphic itself will start overpowering the dialogue. But graphics and sound effects' entire purpose is to support the dialogue, and not drown it out. If you notice your graphics are pulling attention away from what's being said, remove some of the sound effects that's helping this overpowering. That'll help dial the viewer back in. The viewer should always be able to follow what's being said, no matter how cool the graphic is. After that, next I focus on the overall music and vibe of the video. I'll run through the entire video again, and remember that everything is unmuted at this point. And make sure that the music choices themselves actually match the tone of the video. For my personal videos, I usually lean toward jazz or softer background music. Just something that supports an educational, relaxed vibe while also filling that missing space. But when it comes to one of my clients' videos, the type of music changes, but the process always stays the same. From video to video and even section to section, I'll change up the vibe depending on what's being showcased on screen. For example, if I'm editing for one of my clients, John Solo, and this section is breaking down a mythology's history, I'll use something more mysterious or atmospheric. This is also the step where I'll make intentional cuts, giving space for jokes to land, or the exact opposite and adding weight to a serious or important line of dialogue. The very last step of my process is a final polish. I'll clean up the timeline, tighten up spaces, and look for moments where there's there's just too much going on. If something feels overwhelmingly packed, I'll end up disabling sound effects and playing around with the moment a bit more. Oversimplifying is almost always better than overloading. Viewers won't notice if there's less sound design, but they 100% will notice if everything's just too jam-packed in there. Too many sounds can hurt your pacing, clarity, and even retention. And there you go. That's my full professional sound design process, step by step. The biggest thing to remember from this is the sounds themselves change, but the process itself doesn't. That helps me assure no matter what project, new client or returning, I still know exactly what needs to be done. If this helped you, let me know down in the comments. And if you have any questions about Premiere Pro, sound design, or anything at all, feel free to ask. I would love to help out in any way possible. And remember, sound design isn't about being loud. It's about being intentional. And most importantly, the rest are just tools.